Well, folks, with Mr. Biden and Speaker McCarthy continuing their talks on raising the debt ceiling, the one thing they agree on is that the government will not default. Now, that means that anybody, including any entity or country that holds treasury bonds, like China, will get paid. After all, that's what it means to say they're the safest investment in the world, because you have the full faith and credit of the American government behind them. But that doesn't mean there might not be other consequences. Let's take a look at what happened under the Obama administration in 2013. It's not good news, folks, if you're headed to a vacation at a national park, because what we saw, national parks closed temporarily, including the National Zoo and NASA. Then also 800,000 federal employees were out of work and not paid. And then you had paychecks that were delayed to about 1 million federal employees. And you also had contracts with the government that may have been in jeopardy if you were an independent contractor. And finally, financial benefits at the VA were disrupted, okay? Now, when Mr. Trump was president, he was fighting with Congress, especially over things like a budget for the border wall. Does that sound familiar? Again, national parks closed, including the National Museum, the National Zoo, I should say, the Smithsonian, the National Gallery of Art. You also had immigration courts that were closed. You had paychecks delayed to 420,000 federal employees and out of work and not paid. That amounted to almost 400,000 federal employees. So finally, let's be honest about this debt and budget negotiation. They're not talking about budget cuts. They're talking about slowing down the speed at which the budgets grow. Every year, all the government agencies look at what they have left in their budgets in September and say, you know what, we got to spend all that money we have left over. Otherwise, they're going to cut our budget next year. If you think I'm kidding, ask anybody who deals with budgets in the government. Okay.
So as the debt ceiling deadline looms, reports are coming out that officials at the U.S. Treasury are asking agencies if payments can be made later. And joining us now with his take on the debt ceiling talks is co-founder of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity and economic advisor to Trump 2016, economist Stephen Moore. Stephen, great to have you with us here. Bob, of course, gave us this excellent overview of what has happened in the past. Do you think if there is no agreement reached that we could be facing something similar, or would it be worse this time?
Well, Bob, great job explaining what's happened in these past fiscal showdowns. And by the way, I go back to the Reagan years in these things, lived through many of these. The most important point was the first point you made, Bob, which is there will be no default. None. The chances of default are zero on the debt. We have plenty of money coming into the government every day in terms of revenues to pay off the interest on the debt. And so that's not an issue. So that makes me wonder and scratch my head. Why do we have a Treasury Secretary running around the world telling bondholders that you may not be paid? That's only spooking the markets for some kind of political advantage. Shameful, really, and unpatriotic to do that. And of course, Joe Biden is doing the same thing. So no default, but you're right. You two are right that if we don't get an agreement on time, and by the way, it's not June 1st is not the deadline. It's probably sometime in August or September. Then you might see some of those shutdowns. But my feeling is, and this is just me speaking as an economist and an American, if it takes a few weeks to close down the Department of Energy and the Department of Education and not pay foreign aid to try to get our financial balances and our financial balance sheet in order, I'm all for that. Yeah. We can't go forward. By the way, this year alone, it is now looking like we're going to borrow another $2 trillion.
Just amazing. I recall Reagan, I think a couple times had 4 hours of a delay before they got it. I think that happened a couple times.
Bob, I'll tell you something. One time, this was when Obama was president, it went up to literally midnight. And I remember I was on TV and it was 11:58 and 31 seconds and 32 seconds, and they finally reached a deal. So they always wait till the last minute on these things.
Yeah, and I think with Reagan, everybody thought, he fired Patco, so he's willing to do the hard thing.
That's right.
Now, House Speaker McCarthy says it's time to fix our economy. Listen.
I will not give up on you. This won't solve all the problems, but this is the first step, and I'm going to come back the next day and get the next step. Let's make this economy stronger. Let's take care of the debt that we acquired, because we have a responsibility to pay it. And let's stop doing this by the deadline, worrying whether we're going to make it.
Yeah. Now, Stephen, let's be honest about this. The Trump administration did drive up the national debt. A lot of that, or at least some of it, was from the pandemic. OK, so Republicans really need to walk the walk also. But isn't it a good time to start talking about these things?
Yeah, there's no question. You're right, Bob, that, this is a bipartisan spending spree we've seen. Although Biden came in that $6 trillion in 2 years, we've never had anything that financially reckless in the history of the country. And so, yeah, by the way, neither of these parties really wants to cut spending. If we get the deal that the speaker is talking about, you're right. We'll have a 1% per year cap on spending. That's on, that comes on top of the 30 to 40% we already blew out the budget in the last couple of years. And somehow Joe Biden's running around the country saying that's a 22% cut. Mm-hmm. And you know how he's getting that number? Because he wants to increase the budget by 23%. Right. So he's saying a 1% increase is a 22% cut. I mean, who does math like
exactly.
that? Yeah, and Stephen, as you were saying, both sides are to blame, Democrats and Republicans. However, Texas Senator Ted Cruz was on Wake Up America right here on Newsmax this morning, and he said that President Biden is solely to blame for this debt ceiling mess. Take a listen.
For a long time, Joe Biden said, I'm not going to talk, I'm not going to negotiate, I won't even come to the table. That was ridiculous, and it was so ridiculous, ultimately, he had to blink, but he waited so long that they're now backed up in a corner.
What do you think, Stephen?
Well, as you guys know, I worked as an economic advisor to Donald Trump, and I think he did some amazing things for our economy, the tax cuts and the deregulation and the pro-American energy policy. But frankly, Donald Trump was a pretty big spender himself. So do I blame this all on Joe Biden? No. I think the Republicans have a lot of blame, too. But I don't care who's to blame. We got to fix this problem. Because we are the Titanic headed to an iceberg. And unless we turn this thing around, it is going to be a total. I'll tell you this. We will have a financial disaster in this country. So I don't know if it's going to happen in 3 weeks or 3 months or 3 years until we fix this debt.
All right. And again, as you said, we got to work together to do exactly that. Stephen Moore, thank you.
Thanks, guys.